Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Logical Nonsense Podcast, episode 105. Got a loaded one here for you guys. It'll just be me today. It's been a minute since I have been on the pod. Just a lot of schedule changes, trying to get some guests on, which we do have some guests coming very soon, which I'm very excited to announce via my social media. So make sure if you're not following on social medias, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all that jazz, make sure you are. If you can't find me, you aren't looking hard enough. But let's get started, man. A lot of NBA stuff happening, a lot of NFL stuff happening, a lot of hip-hop stuff happening. I'm excited to see if the hip-hop stuff continues to heat up. Yeah, let's just hop right into it. First off, with the NBA, I do want to start talking about the Lakers. The Lakers just took over the 2 seed in the West, which I believe is still the case as of today. This is huge, man. I mean, they went out, they got Luka, and, a lot of people were like, I don't know if they're going to be contenders this year. I don't know if that's the case. And they're starting to look like it. Luka's starting to get that team chemistry going, which I think is important. LeBron has been balling out. He just won Player of the Month for January, and he's not looking like he is 40 years old. He is looking right back, comfortable. He's playing smart basketball. He's heating up. Luka, he's been, like I said, he's been heating up as well. It feels like he's getting more comfortable. He seems to be getting more and more healthy. And Austin Reeves has stepped up in big ways for them. Their defense, I think, is the biggest key for them, which has improved dramatically since the start of the year. And we've continued to see it get better. I think that's a testament to JJ Redick and what he's been doing. And that's someone who hasn't been talked about a lot. This is JJ Redick's first year with the Lakers. And for them to be in a 2 seed compared to the last few years where, they've been in, a play-in position or a lower seed, maybe like a 6 seed, I think that's huge. I think it'll put them in a better situations, especially, you're not really playing a game 7 away until you're in the semifinals playing a 1 seed potentially. So that's going to be huge. I think come playoff time, I think Luka, he's got that championship appearance under his belt now. I think he's feeling more confident with his team and his abilities. So things are looking up for the Lakers. They definitely have things going right for them. Players like Rui Hachimura, I feel like, has also stepped up. And I'm just excited to see what this team can do come playoff time, because you can't ever count out LeBron. And now I don't think you can count out LeBron plus Luka. So for the people thinking that it would take 1 or 2 years, I think it might be a little sooner than that. If we look at a potential matchup with the Thunder or Lakers, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I might take the Lakers. If we get to that point, they could get knocked off before that. But I think the Lakers would be one of the worst matchups for the Thunder to face in the playoffs, because I think they can outpower them on offense. I think defense is the biggest question there. Can you shut down SGA? And, it comes down to LeBron and what he's capable of at his age this late into his career come playoff time. So excited for the Lakers. I think they are going to be a team to watch for the rest of the season as well as playoffs. And don't be surprised if we see another finals appearance from LeBron. Speaking of teams heating up, let's talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers. 11 straight wins. They're cruising, man. A really, really great record. I think they're 50-11 going in, up until I recorded this podcast. And that's a really outstanding regular season record. My biggest knock on them up to this point was, have they beaten the good teams? They lost to the Thunder. They've lost to Celtics twice. They finally beat the Celtics. And I think in that game, it might have been one of those light bulb moments for the Cavs. It felt like Donovan Mitchell was not scared of the Celtics whatsoever, which I think is not good news for the Celtics. I do think in a 7-game series right now, I'm still taking the Celtics. And I think that's the question people are asking themselves is, can they sustain a 7-game series? I've heard some other people say, I might take Cleveland in game 7 in Cleveland against the Celtics. I don't know if I agree with that. Celtics have so much experience in the playoffs. They know how to close out games. They've had a lot of adversity throughout their time. I know they got it done last year, but previous to that, think about how many times they got there and didn't get it done. I feel like if anyone has been proven in the playoffs, it's the Celtics now. They finally broke through. I still am taking the Cavs to this point. I'm still taking the Celtics to this point. I understand the Cavs argument. They're playing at such a high level. Donovan Mitchell especially. But you also got dudes like Jared Allen stepping up when he needs to. You got dudes like Darius Garland stepping up. Evan Mobley has stepped up in a huge way. He's a big part of this team. The team chemistry is huge. They're coached really, really well. He should win Coach of the Year this year just based off of the roster they have and what he's done to it. The step up from last year and the just IQ of this team seems to be so much higher than last year. And that's a huge testament to the coaching as well as the team just learning from their experiences. So I'm excited to see what this Cavs team does. Do I believe in them fully? I'm not quite sure. I still think they're that regular season team who could make a run in playoffs. Maybe they're a conference championship team. But I wouldn't be surprised if you see them lose in the conference semis or even, that first round. I don't know. You could see upsets. It just all comes down to because the playoffs are just a different game. Regular season aside, it feels like a reset for every team. And we're always shooting ourselves in the foot like, damn, I didn't see that coming. Why didn't I think of that? Like Jimmy Butler always showing up and going on a playoff run, right? Like these are the types of things we have to remember when it comes playoff time. And I think that's something we have to remember with the Cavs as well. Going to the Mavs, man, heartbreak in Dallas. I feel bad for a Dallas fan right now. If you have a Dallas Mavericks fans in your life, or if you're R1 listening or watching this show, I feel bad for you. I genuinely am sorry. First, the Luka trade, face of your franchise. Some would argue the future face of the league. And they trade him for not much, which we've been over on this podcast. So I'm not going to go into great detail on that. But then AD goes down his first game. After AD goes down, Kyrie now just announced torn ACL out for the season. This is devastating, man. And I think what's so devastating about it is we don't know how much longer we're going to get that high level playing of AD. AD is an older guy, and we don't know how much longer we have of them. And I think that window just closes a little bit further for the Mavericks, especially with such a big move like trading Luka and kind of telling your fans, like, I think this is better suited for us to win a championship. For something like this to happen in its first year, you're kind of letting down fans. So this year, I think it's closed off. Obviously, I don't believe in the Mavericks anymore. But, next year, maybe they figure it out. But I don't know if you get more than next year. I think if you want to prove it to your fans that this trade was worth it, I think you got to get it done next year. And I think what will be really interesting is if the Lakers pull off a championship run, I think people, even more so than they are now, are going to be calling for Nico's head, because that just shows the level that Luka is at and the level he can perform at when he has weapons around him, when he has guys like, this sounds stupid, like LeBron, Austin Reeves, and a good coaching system. So for them to give up on Luka when they did, and if he were to make the championship this year, be the biggest fuck you, it'd be the biggest slap in the face to Mavericks fans, to the GM, Nico, whatever his name is. And honestly, I think it's kind of incredible how not ignorant, like I get as a GM, you want to defend your moves because you're trying to save your job and you're trying to show fans and the team and media as well as your team, like, we're making the right moves here. But I don't know, it's his arrogance a little bit with it. I think that is rubbing me the wrong way, especially in this first year. And I get it. He is at a different position because he's made such a blockbuster move that we have never seen anything like it. So he has to kind of be a little bit arrogant, more so than most GMs would be in a position that he's in. But at the same time, like, you can't be making claims like winning championships in the next few years when shit like this happens. So, which is out of his control. But going to the Warriors, Steph Curry's been at such a high level. I think the conversation that I want to discuss here is, where does Steph Curry land? Is he the greatest point guard of all time? Traditional point guards, obviously, he is not one. He is definitely a shooting point guard. He is one of the best shooters of all time, if not the greatest shooter of all time. And I also think it's interesting in the way that he absolutely changed the game. Three-pointers are such a huge point of the game. And before that, there were shots being put up from the three-point line, not at the rate or volume or the belief in the three-pointer as there is in now. And I think he was a huge pioneer in that, and that's something that not a lot of people can say they did, that I truly changed the game. And he is one of those people. When it's all said and done, I think there will be arguments. He is a top 10 player of all time. Well, I believe that. I don't know. I think there's still some more to show. I mean, he has 4 championships, one of which I still can't believe he got, that 2022 championship, I believe, with Andrew Wiggins. I mean, that one was crazy. Like, I did not expect the Warriors to go on a run like that. So we'll see, man. I think it'll be interesting to see how this year ends up with Jimmy Butler and the next year. I don't think this team, even with Jimmy Butler, I don't think they're as talented as his championship teams in the past have been, with Clay or KD and a very high level Draymond, not like this lazy Draymond that we're seeing right now. So we'll see. Do I think they can make a run this year? I am not sure. And I know that's not the greatest answer on a podcast. I'm supposed to have in-depth analysis and give you direct answers. But I think they've been on a good run lately. I'm just worried about this team's endurance. They aren't super young. And yes, they have the experience, and Steph Curry went off in the Olympics, and we know what he's capable in playoff time. We know what Jimmy Butler is capable in playoff time. So it's hard for me to stand here and say, nah, they can't make a run. But at the same token, one, they're a little older, and with age, you do kind of cut down on your endurance during the playoffs. And I also think the other aspect of the playoffs is they are on a very, very, very tough West. You've got the Lakers, you've got the Lakers, you've got the Thunder, you got the Grizzlies, Rockets, all tough teams, man. And you could even get teams who play in the in-season tournament who I think can make teams like the Warriors have a run for their money. So we will see if they can test the durability of the playoffs, because it is very demanding playing a 7-game series over and over again. So we will see if the Warriors can do it. I'm not counting them out, though. I just think I'm hesitant on the Warriors as of now. Want to also talk about the Suns. There's been a lot of talk about the Suns, KD wanting a trade or going somewhere else. And I think it is so interesting because this feels like the Nets experiment once again. I think last week on my social media Instagram page, which again, you should check out if you haven't. I post polls every week, sometimes daily. And one of my polls was, is the Suns the worst experiment of all time? I think it is up there with the Nets. I think the Nets is the only other team I can think of that was bad. But the one thing I will make the case for the Suns is the Suns don't even seem like a play-in team this year. They still could make that run. I believe they're in position right now to make that run if they wanted to. But it doesn't feel like they're a contender. And the Nets at least had runs, right? Like KD's foot on the on the 3-point line. If he doesn't have that, who knows? Maybe they win a championship that year, right? Like, we don't know that for sure. So I think it is interesting to compare the two just because they're different situations. And I also think it's interesting from the perspective that they went out and they had, before KD was traded, before they went and got Bradley Beal, I felt like they had a solid team with Chris Paul, DeAndre Ayton, KD, and Booker. And they really depleted their depth chart and their depth on their bench to go get Bradley Beal, who has done basically nothing. And that was a huge fail in my book. And I've never really been a big Bradley Beal guy. I feel like he's always been one of those guys who was good on a bad team. And I think he was good on a bad team because he was on a bad team. That might be a bold take, but we are seeing it now with the Suns. He's just not really producing at the level that I think a lot of people thought he would be producing at. And the Suns, I think, are failing for it. KD, Booker, Beal, that whole team, they don't seem to like each other. They don't seem to be having fun on the court. And I think that's a very important aspect. You don't see their bench get up during big plays or get into the game. And I think team chemistry right now is one of the biggest important factors right now. And I think, we saw this huge super team kind of era. And with that, we also saw that super teams don't always work, like the Nets, like this Suns team, and very many others. Like another good example of experiment Lakers, like with Steve Nash and Kobe Bryant and Dwight Howard, right? Like we thought that was going to be a crazy super team. What do you know? Age got to them. Steve Nash was out of his prime and Dwight Howard was out of his prime. So it just didn't work, right? So things like this, I think this is where it comes down to, not only do you have that super team, but do you have that chemistry? Because what's weird about this Suns team, and I think the difference between a team like, the Thunder, if you want to call them a super team, or the Celtics, right? They still have a core. Like SGA was their core, and they built around SGA, and they drafted guys around SGA. And same with the Celtics, right? Jaylen Brown and Tatum, those are those two guys. They are those guys to go and get. And they built around those guys. Yeah, they made trades like Kristaps Porzingis, but they added. And I feel like teams need to strategically add guys who aren't bad locker room guys. And I'm not saying KD's a bad locker room guy. That's not what I'm trying to get at here at all. I just feel like super teams work when the team chemistry works and with teams get along with each other. LeBron, Dwayne Wade, Bosh, they were all friends before they were ever teammates. And I think you just got to make it work chemistry and super team wise. Speaking of the Thunder, I do want to talk about SGA. Had a 50 bomb the other night. And I genuinely, I understand why Jokic is still in the conversation. What he's doing is insane year after year. And maybe this is voter fatigue for me. But I don't know how you can sit here another year and say that he deserves it more than SGA. SGA, once again, has put his team in a position to be the number 1 seed in the West. He has also just been lights out. I mean, I think there's a 50-plus game streak of him with 20 or more points in a game. That is producing consistently night after night. That is pouring your all, putting your effort in every single night and performing at a high level and seeing your team succeed because of that. I believe he deserves it. He is one of the biggest rising stars. And I think in terms of value right now, I think SGA is providing more value to the Thunder than Jokic is to the Nuggets. I understand Jokic is just as much as a big value. But once again, I think it's SGA's turn to go and get that award. Can they win a title? This one's really interesting. A lot of teams, a lot of people don't believe that, while they are a great regular season team, such as the Cavs are too, they aren't a playoff team. They aren't tested, and they'll lose in the playoffs. I think if it's not this year, I think it's next year because I think they're close. I genuinely think they're close. I think their chemistry is close. I think SGA is mentally tougher than a lot of people think. I think this team is mentally tougher than a lot of people think. It feels like there's not a lot of talk about guys sitting out or not performing or not wanting to go on a nightly basis. So I think that is something that to consider when thinking about them. But overall, man, I think the NBA has been really fun these last few weeks. It's always fun. Come after All-Star break, feels like guys are playing harder. There's a lot of fun storylines like the Pistons, like the Trailblazers potentially making a play-in run. Like there are so many good stories going into the end of the year, and I think that's what leads to great playoffs. And I'm excited for this year's playoffs. I feel like there's a lot of great competition, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot of shakeup in who's in that conference championship on both sides this year, because I really think that it's anyone's game, in my opinion. Going to football, a lot freaking happened today, but first let's go back a little bit, starting with the Deebo Samuel trade. What do I think about it? I love it for the Commanders. I think it is a very calculated experiment, giving up a 5th-round pick, which is not much for a very high-level player who, or I should say, has played high level in the past. You know, I know he's dealt with injuries. I know he's dealt with health problems. But somebody like Cliff Kingsbury, I think, is perfect for Deebo Samuel. He needs a revitalization, and, you know, Kyle Shanahan's a genius mind too. So I'm not discrediting what Kyle Shanahan, but obviously there's something going on there. I mean, there's just some weird effort-wise from what I could see when he was playing, where it just didn't seem like he wanted to be there really. And so I think this will be a nice revitalization. Commanders are an exciting team with Terry McLaurin and Jaden Daniels and that running back room. They have some good tight ends. You know, maybe just improve the line a little bit. But this team, what they could do with Deebo Samuel, what Cliff Kingsbury and his mind could do this coming year, I think is very exciting for Commanders fans and the Commanders in general. It's going to be a fun team to watch. Terry McLaurin and Deebo Samuel will be a great duo, in my opinion. And I hope we can get back to seeing Deebo being that versatile Swiss Army knife player that we've seen in the past, because I think if we can get him in the open space, get him opportunities, we'll see the Deebo we've seen in the past that looks like unstoppable. So hopefully they can unleash that. I also want to talk about a little bit about the combine. You know, it sucks. It feels like more and more year after year, we just hear about, you know, the top prospects not participating, which I don't love that trend. I feel like when we talk about that trend, it takes away from the game, and it doesn't help that you know, the top prospects like Cam Ward, Shadur Sanders, Ashton Genty, all these big names aren't participating anymore. And I feel like more and more people are just not interested in the combine because of it. So hopefully that will change in the future, because I don't like the trend. It just feels like more and more, like in a general sports term, it feels like people aren't participating for whatever reason. They're sitting out, or I don't know. I don't get it. Like, compete, have that competitive instinct, in my opinion. Like, if you're that worried about your draft stock falling, go out there and fucking compete. Go out there and be better than everyone else and prove why you are the number one prospect. I get there's more to lose on a lot of these prospects, like Cam Ward. You know, you have a bad throwing day, your draft stock could fall, but who cares, man? Like, go out there, compete, go against the best quarterbacks, and show why you are number one. If you really are number one, shouldn't be an issue. So I don't know. I'm not a fan of it, but my favorite positions this year in the draft, I love the edge rushers. I think the edge rushers are going to be great this year. I liked what I saw from James Pierce. I loved Abdul Carter. I know he has some sort of stress fracture kind of thing going on. I'm not worried about it. He was an absolute dog in college, and I think he might be the best prospect in the draft. So I'm really excited about the edge rushers. There's a lot more on the name, and I'll get to that in my mock draft. But I'm also really excited about this running back class. I think it is absolutely loaded, and you could get a fourth round draft running back. And I think you would still be happy with your results. I mean, it is just that in depth. Ashton Gentile, Marion Hampton, Caleb Johnson, Quinshawn Judkins, Travion Henderson. Tootin had a really good combine. Like the list goes on, and I think it's really going to be hard to miss on this running back class because I just think there's so much potential with all of them. And it's time that we had a running back class like this because it feels like we've been wanting this for a while. So I'm excited to see what this running back class does. And I forgot about my boy Cam Scattaboo, who I know a lot of people are hating on, but do not count out Hart. That's what I'm going to say about that kid. We can talk about attributes all day. We can talk about, he's not the fastest. He's not the tallest or whatever. But at the end of the day, I think it comes to will, effort, and willingness to learn. And I think he has all three of those traits. A lot of people have doubted him in the past, and I think he wants you to doubt him because that's exactly when he performs the best. I don't love the receiver class this year. It's not bad per means, but it just wasn't as good. It's not as good as it was last year. The quarterback class, I think, is getting a little bit overhated, and I think that's because of last year's class. I do still think there's some good prospects in the QB class. Do I think they're franchise changing? No. However, I do think there are QBs that can help franchises perform at a high level. So Cam Ward being a top of the list for me. So stay tuned for the mock draft. It's coming very soon. Very excited to present that. Next, I want to talk about the Saquon extension. Huge deal for Saquon. One of the biggest deals we've seen for a running back. And last year, there was a lot of talk about running backs and the money they're getting paid and how it's so little and how, a lot of teams view them as almost like non-recyclable, right? Like their lifespan is very little. And I think it's true. It is true. Like they don't have a very long lifespan within the NFL, and it's valid. And I feel like a lot of teams have been able to succeed with a running back committee, which you can go way back in my podcast archives, and I've talked my point on this specific topic. But there are maybe 3 or 4 running backs that I genuinely think could get a deal like this and actually deserve it. Saquon being one of them, Christian McCaffrey being another. In a few years, I think potentially Jahmyr Gibbs could get into this conversation. Derrick Henry, I think not right now because of his age, but a few years ago, absolutely, I think he deserved the bag. And I think that's about it. Those are 4 guys. And the rest of them, I don't think so. I don't think you could pay that kind of money and it actually work out or end out good. So other things that happened today, Tyler Lockett released. Interesting. I understand the cap hit and the age factor. But it is interesting that not only did Tyler Lockett get released, but also DK Metcalf requests a trade. Seahawks are going in the wrong direction here. It sounds like Geno is going to be their man next year. Now you lose Lockett. Now you lose DK. Who's your team? What's your identity? I like McDonald, but they've got to revitalize this roster in a new way, or else I don't see them being successful next year whatsoever. And maybe they are planning on a rebuild. That's fine, but they need to go find guys very soon. So that's my tidbit on that. Where I think Tyler Lockett would fit well, I think the Cowboys would be an interesting fit. I think a team like the Bills actually would be an interesting fit. I could see him fitting well there. Chargers, they could use a guy like Lockett, in my opinion. And same goes for DK. I think DK could fit well with the Chargers. I also think DK could go to a team like the Packers. I know they've discussed options with the Packers in the past. DK is a different case. I think he needs a team that can handle his attitude and his ego. and are willing to make him the number one. A team like the Patriots, I think, would be really interesting because I think DK could be that number one receiver that he wants to be. And I think the Patriots would be willing to give him a contract extension that he's looking for Drake May. So would be interesting to see DK going to Patriots, but we will see where he ends up. There's a lot of guys like Cooper Kupp. Kupp, I really want him to go to the Broncos, man. I think that makes the most sense for him. And I think it would be really nice for the Broncos to get him. Again, I think pretty much similar teams that I've already said also fit for him. But speaking of Cooper Kupp, that's another team that I think is also going in the wrong direction. One game away from making the Super Bowl, and now you're talking about getting rid of Matt Stafford, Cooper Kupp. Why are you breaking up the team? I'm not necessarily sure. I think, especially with how young their defense is, there is absolutely another chance they run it back with the same roster they have. They could make it next year on the Super Bowl. So, doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but not my decisions, right? Not Super Bowl, sorry, conference championship. Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams are both gone. It'll be interesting to see where they go. It sounds like they're kind of a package deal. I think about teams around the league that need a QB, maybe aren't looking for someone young. Teams that come to mind, Tennessee Titans, they seem like a team that would make a move like this potentially. Do I love that fit? Not really, no, but I could see it. Other teams, possibly the Raiders. I don't know. I don't know if Davante Adams would want to go back to the Raiders after that. We just talked about Seattle. Maybe. I could not see Aaron Rodgers in a Seahawks jersey though. That would be weird. So yeah, and Christian Kirk just got released. Joey Bosa just got released. A whole lot of releases to get rid of that salary cap issues that a lot of teams have. So, all right, and to finish off the podcast, I did want to talk a little bit about hip hop with you guys. First I want to talk about the Drake and Next Door album. Still haven't gotten a chance to talk about it on this podcast, nor did I release a 3 hits, 3 misses. And the reason for the 3 hits, 3 misses because I didn't think I was going to get a lot of positive feedback from it. I genuinely did not like this album, like at all. I think I added one song off the album. And I very rarely can't find the good in an album. And I'm not saying this album is like trash, or I'm not even saying that it's bad. I just think it was very mediocre, and I felt like it was very mediocre. It felt like very cruise control from Drake and his efforts, and I think we see more of that cruise control. And maybe this is just me, maybe this is just my ear, but I hear that when I hear him go to R&B as of late. I think his R&B when he first started was really great, and I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was the passion or the tone in which he reflected in his R&B, but it feels like nowadays it just sounds very similar, and there's no creativity to the way he's delivering his sound. And this sounded very similar to me as something like an Honestly Nevermind or even a Certified Lover Boy on certain tracks, which neither of those I was very big fans of. And so I think he's at his best when he is creatively infusing R&B within his rapping ability. And I think he needs to get back to that because I liked For All the Dogs. Was it his best album? No. But we haven't had a really, really good Drake album in a while. And I feel pretty confident with that statement. So also want to talk about Joey Badass. He released a 3-pack. I really enjoyed it. I think his passion, his aggression, his tone, his flows. I mean, they're always so incredible, right? Like he is one of the best at bringing that passion and reflection of his voice. And he just he spits like he has rent due, and I love that about him. And I think it was respectable, like what he released. I'll be interested to see if an album comes out of it. But I do think it was really interesting kind of way of going about kind of like getting in the mix with Kendrick and Drake and J. Cole and all that beef. Like, I think sometimes rappers have this way of like not understanding completely where they are. And I think Joey Badass is in kind of that place. I feel like he thinks he's in that upper echelon of rappers like J. Cole and Drake and Kendrick Lamar and whoever the hell you want to put up there. And he's not. Like I wouldn't even, we talked about it on my Hall of Fame Yay or Nay podcast with Honeybee Reviews. We don't even think he's in the Hall of Fame, but we think ASAP Rocky's in the Hall of Fame, right? So take that as you will. Great, one of the greatest mixtapes of all time, one of my favorite artists right now. But I also understand where he's at, and he hasn't released something since 1999 that I think has gotten that media attention and gotten that hip hop ear really going. Have they been great projects? Absolutely. Have they been like mind blowing projects? I don't think so. And I think that's where he needs to get back to. Boldy James drops another album. It's solid. I like it. I think the question here that's interesting is he releasing too much? We've seen this with like NBA YoungBoy and some other guys like Boldy James, and it feels like they just like they freestyle or whatever they want to do. They just like constantly make music and then they just release it. Like there's no effort or thought behind the albums they put out. And that's not to say like this isn't good work. I just think there could be higher quality work. And I think somebody like Boldy James, who is good with the pen, I think he could make something masterful with concepts. And I'd like to see that from him because I think, maybe he wants to be that underground freestyle, dropping an album every other week kind of guy. But I think he could push himself to a different level as a hip hop artist if he were to drop something with concept and conceptuality and all that jazz. So, and yeah, I mean that's really it. I think it'll be interesting to see who drops this year. It seems like a slower year in hip hop so far. I know we're only in February, but it felt like February this time last year we already had like crazy albums out. So we will see where hip hop goes. Very excited about NBA and the football progression. So make sure to stay tuned. We got some good guests coming on very soon. Ex college football players potentially, and current NFL players. So make sure to stay tuned. And as always, folks, make sure to stay logical and rant that nonsense.